The December 1986 uprising in Almaty, causes, consequences and historical significance. There is outline. Protests. Estimates of protesters. Loss of life. Separation from the Assar. And references. The primary reason for the peaceful student demonstrations that started in the early morning of 17 December was the dismissal of the long-serving first secretary of the Communist Party of Kazakhstan, Dinmuhamed Punaib, on 16 December and the appointment of Gennady Kolbin as the first secretary. Kolbin was unpopular as he had not previously lived or worked in Kazakhstan. Demonstrations started in the morning of 17 December 1986 as students gathered in front of the Central Committee building on Brezhnev Square to protest the decision of the CSU to appoint Kolbin rather than an ethnic Kazakh. The number of protesters increased too, as students from universities and institutes joined the crowd on Brezhnev Square. TASS reported. A group of students, incited by nationalistic elements, last evening and today took to the streets of Almaty expressing disapproval of the decisions of the recent plenary meeting. Hooligans, parasites and other antisocial persons made use of this situation and resorted to unlawful actions against representatives of law and order. They set fire to a food store and to private cars and insulted townspeople. Meetings were held at factories, schools, and other institutions to condemn these actions. Witnesses reported that the rioters were given vodka, narcotics and leaflets, indicating that the riots were not spontaneous. They disagreed with the characterization of the riot as related to nationalism or independence. They said it was a protest over Gorbachev's appointing an outsider to head the state. As a response, the CPP Central Committee ordered troops from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Truzhniki, volunteers, cadets, policemen, and the KGB to cordon the square and videotape the participants. The situation escalated around 5 p.m. as troops were ordered to disperse the protesters. Clashes between the security forces and the demonstrators continued throughout the night in the square and in different parts of Almaty. The second day, protests turned into civil unrest as clashes in the streets, universities and dormitories between troops, volunteers, and militia units, and Kazakh students turned into a wide-scale armed confrontation. The clashes were not controlled until the third day. The Almaty events were followed by smaller protests and demonstrations in Shymkent, Pavlodar, Karaganda and Taldykorgan. Estimates of the number of protesters vary. Initial reports from Moscow said that about 200 people were involved in the riots. Later reports from the Kazakh SUR authorities estimated that the riots drew people. Other estimates are of at least 2 protesters with arrested and jailed and an unknown number of casualties. Jeltoxin leaders say over Kazakhs participated in the protests nationwide. In Karaganda, 54 students were expelled from the universities, and 5 students were prosecuted. According to the Kazakh SUR government, there were 2 deaths during the riots, including a volunteer police worker and a student. Both of them had died from blows to the head. About 100 others were detained and several others were sentenced to terms in labor camps. Sources cited by the US Library of Congress claim that at least 200 people died or were summarily executed soon after. Some accounts estimate casualties at more than. The writer Mukhtar Shakhanov claimed that a KGB officer testified that 168 protesters were killed. The Jeltoxin events formed the basis of the main platforms of the Azad and Alash political parties and the Jeltoxin movement that developed in independent Kazakhstan. Kazakh students Kairat Raskolbekov and Lazat Asanova were among the victims. In the March 1991 referendum, the population of Kazakhstan overwhelmingly voted to preserve the Soviet system. 89.2% of the population participated in the vote, of which 94.1% voted in favor. After the aborted coup d'état in August, the Soviet government in Kazakhstan declared independence on 16 December 1991 as the last republic to declare independence. The Soviet Union itself disintegrated 10 days later. On 18 September 2006, the Dawn of Liberty Monument, dedicated to the 20th anniversary of Kazakhstan, was opened with a solemn ceremony in Almaty. In the 21st century, Kazakhstan has come to be regarded as the symbol of Kazakhstan's struggle for independence. The monument has three parts, two pylons of intricate shapes symbolizing the breach and conflict of past and future, the explosion of the nation's consciousness and downfall of ideological canons, and the triumph of liberty and independence of the state. Then Muhammad Qunayf died in 1993 at the age of 82. An avenue and an institute in Almaty were named after him, as well as an avenue in the city center of Nur-Sultan, designated as the capital in 1997. And there are references. Thank you for your attention.